Shabbat Shalom Yasharala. Ba'ashem Mashik Yahushua. All praise to the power of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And we are located on here, and we are the Light of Zion, located here in South Florida, Broward County, 2937 West Broward Boulevard. I'm Elder Bishop Lapala to my left.
Officer Aliyah. Shalom Yasharala.
And we're going to continue today in chapter 20. Okay. But before we do that, let's go to Colossians 3 verse 17.
This is the book of Colossians chapter 3 and verse 17. And whatsoever ye do in word or deed, do all by Hashem Mashiach Yahushua, giving thanks to the Most High and the Father by Him.
Right. Whatever you do in word or deed, meaning what? Whatever you say or whatever action you partake in, to make sure they're consistent with the Most High's laws, statutes, and commandments, and the teaching of the Mashiach Yahushua. Let's go to 1 Kings chapter 20, verse 1.
This is the book of 1 Kings chapter 20 and verse 1. And Ben-Hadad, the king of Assyria, gathered all the hosts together, and there were kings with him.
Wow.
And horses and chariots, and he went up and besieged Samaria and warred against it.
Oh, read it again.
Khan.
It said 90 and 2. Maybe that was not that many. Read it again.
I said 19?
It's a 90 and 2. Right?
Okay, Salak. This is the verse. This is 1 Kings chapter 20 and verse 1. And Ben-Hadad, the king of Assyria, gathered all.
Read it again. Not Syria, not Assyria, but Syria. Read it again.
And Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria, gathered all his hosts together, and there were 32 kings with him, and horses and chariots. And he went up and besieged Samaria and warred against it.
Right. And Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria, gathered all his hosts together. His host, that's talking about his military, his army. And there were 32 kings with him. That's talking about like 30 and 32 different nations were in alliance with him to fight against Israel. 32 nations were in alliance with this the king of Syria to fight against Israel. And he went up and besieged Samaria and warred against, besieging what? Encamped around Samaria. Yet, his mighty men that surrounding that, the whole city of Samaria, the northern kingdom, to make war against our people. Read on.
And he sent messengers to Ahab, king of Israel, into the city, and said unto him, Thus saith Ben-Hadad, Thy silver and thy gold is mine, thy wives also and thy children, even the goodliest.
Wow.
Are mine.
No, this is a threat right there. He said messages to the king Ahab of Israel. He said what? Your silver and your gold are mine, your wives also and your children. He wants everything from this man. All his riches and his family, his wife and children. That's the ultimate disrespect right there. The ultimate, humiliation right there. That's the threat that he sent to Ahab, king of northern kingdom of Israel. Read on.
Verse 4. And the king of Israel answered and said, My Adawan.
See that's how desperate they are to conquer Israel. Just like today. All the nations of this earth are following suit in this endeavor against Israel, because all the nations are, whether overtly or covertly, are in alliance against our people, against Israel. They took all our gold and silver and our resources, destroyed our family, to go back to slavery. They took our wives. They ravished our women, sold our youngins into slavery, So historically, the heathens have been doing that to Israel. Read verse of 4 again.
And the king of Israel answered and said, My Lord, O king, according to thy saying, I am thine and all that I have.
So because no Ahab, he forgot that the Most High was his power. And when he heard that the king of Syria, Ben-Hadad, was in alliance with 32 other kings, his knees started wobbling, started getting feeble, started trembling, becoming fearful for his life and I guess for his family, and I guess not for his family because he agreed to give up his family to the king of Syria. But because of the multitude of that army, the size of the army that was besieging Samaria, he bowed down to them. Read on, verse 5.
Verse 5. And the messengers came again and said, Thus speaketh Ben-Hadad, saying, Although I have sent unto thee, saying, Thou shalt deliver me thy silver and thy gold and thy wives and thy children, yet I will send my servants unto thee tomorrow about this time, and they shall search thine house and the house of thy servants, and it shall be that whatsoever is pleasant in thine eyes, they shall put it in their hand and take it away.
Right, so I guess that wasn't enough. The first threat he made to Ben-Hadad, to Ahab was what? I want your silver and gold. I want your wives and your family. He said, that's not enough. They said, what? I want everything your servants have also. So he said, my servants are going to come into your servant's house and search their premises and their properties, and whatever looks that it has any kind of value, they're going to take it. Read on.
Verse 7. And the king of Israel called all the elders of the land and said, Mark, I pray you, and see how this man seeketh mischief. For he sent unto me for my wives and for my children and for my silver and for my gold, and I denied him not.
Right. Then the king of Israel called all the elders of the land and said, Mark, mean what? Be aware, take notice of this, be cognizant of this, I pray you, and see how this man seeketh mischief, for he sent unto me for my wives and for my children and for my silver and for my gold, and I denied him not. So he was now in consultation with the elders regarding the threat and the imminent danger that was posed upon him by the Syrian king and his alliance. Read on.
Verse 8. And all the elders and all the people said unto him, Hearken not unto him, nor consent.
Right. But the elders and all the people said unto him, Nah, don't hearken, don't listen to this guy. With him, nor consent. Read on.
Verse 9. Wherefore he said unto the messengers of Ben-Hadad, Tell my lord the king all that thou didst send for to thy servant at the first I will do, but this thing I may not do. And the messenger departed and brought word again.
They get me at 1 Kings 20:7. But it's strange though that that the elders and the people advised him not to do the second part of the threat, not to honor the second part of the threat, but to honor the first part, to take to give them your wives and your children. I guess the elders and the people were saying, no, it's coming to no. It's okay. You can give them all your stuff, but your wife, your children, but no, it's touching theirs now.
Right.
No, we can't go for that. No, we're gonna have to fight. Give me 1 Kings 20 verse 7.
First
at
Kings.
least he had the sense to consult with the people before he made the decision to honor the threat or what. Read on verse 1 Kings 20 verse 7.
1 Kings chapter 20 and verse 7.
No, give me what I meant to. In the multitude of counsel there is safety. What is that scripture? I meant to get.
Oh, this Proverbs 11 and 24.
Is that what it is? That's the scripture. I like it.
11. It's not. It's in Proverbs though. Without counsel, purpose or 14. I thought it was 24. 14. The water.
Proverbs 11:24. 11,
14. 14.
I read. Get that. Give that.
Proverbs chapter 11 and verse 14. Where no counsel is, the people fall. But in the multitude of counselors, there is safety.
Right. So you always have to have it, just like a patient a patient who is about to go to undertake a major operation. You don't just go and take undergo that major operation without consulting a second physician to get a second opinion.
Kahaan.
Same thing with Israel. With the more sides saying, hey, in the multitude of safety, in the multitude of counsel, there's safety. Don't just rely on your own instinct and your own, gut feeling, so to speak, your own wisdom.
Got a precept.
Read it again and then give me that precept.
Kahaan. This is the book of Proverbs, chapter 11 and verse 14. Where no counsel is, the people fall.
Right. We don't counsel people fall because you're not getting the proper advice from people who may be familiar with the situation. Read on.
But in the multitude of counselors,
In the multitude of counselors.
there is safety.
See that? Not just one, but the multitude of counselors. So you have to consult a variety of people and the different issues at hand. So you can make so you can properly evaluate the situation and make the right decision. What was your precept?
Proverbs 15 and verse 22. Without counsel, purpose are disappointed, but in the multitude of counselors, they are established.
Right, exactly. So you're gonna be disappointed if you're without counseling. But in the multitude of counseling, right, you will be advised of the situation correctly and make the right decision. And that's exactly what Ahab did by consulting with the elders and the wise, people of wisdom in Israel. Go back to 1 Kings.
Kahaan. 1 Kings chapter 20 and verse 9. I think I finished 8.
Read it again.
In verse 8.
Go to it.
And all the elders and all the people said unto him, hearken not unto him, nor consent.
Right. Don't listen to this guy. Don't agree to that. Read on.
Verse 9. Wherefore he said unto the messengers of Benhadad, tell my lord the king, that all thou didst send for to thy servant at the first I will do, but this thing I may not do. And the messenger departed and brought him word again.
Right. So he took the advice of his counselors and told the servants of Ben-Hadad to tell Ben-Hadad, hey, the first request you made for the silver and gold and from our wives and children, that I'm willing to grant to you. But the second request, that you want all the precious things in my servant's house, I ain't gonna go for that. Of course, he wanted to make sure, because he had to agree. I had to disagree with that part because he wanted the backing of the people. The people wasn't gonna go with that. I read on.
Verse 10. And Benhadad sent unto him and said, the gods do so unto me, and more also, if the dust of Samaria shall suffice for handfuls for all the people that follow me.
So Ben-Hadad let him know. The gods do so unto me, and more also, if the dust of Samaria shall suffice for handfuls for all the people that follow me. So let him know, I got a multitude of people behind me. I got a huge army.
Right.
The dust of Samaria is not even enough compared to the size of the army that I have. So be very fearful. That's what he's telling King Kahaan. Read.
Verse 11. And the king of Israel answered and said, tell him, let not him that girdeth. I'm going to read it again.
Yeah, read it again.
And the king of Israel answered and said, tell him, let not him that girdeth on his harness boast himself as he that putteth it off.
Right, what does that mean? Anyone figure that? What was that? Let's talk about. This is the king of Israel responding to a threat from Ben-Hadad. And the king of Israel answered and said, tell him, let not him that girdeth on his harness. What's a harness?
Something that could
let's a military protective your shield buckler and all
okay.
that. Your shield and buckler, your military garments, the protective wear when you're about to engage in warfare. That's what a harness is. So the king of Israel answered him and said, tell him, let not him that girdeth on his harness boast himself as he that putteth it off.
Oh.
What is it saying? Yeah, take a shot at it. Go ahead.
Saying, don't worry about the man who's depending on his harness. Don't be more fearful of him than the man who can put it off. Because he obviously more manly and more confident in his fight than the other man.
Nah. Anybody else? God, see, let them know. You're saying, what he's really saying is that you're talking all tough right now. You're boasting about the size of your army. How much the dust of Samaria is not even enough to compare to the size of your army. But I'm telling you, don't boast too much. Understand? You may put on a garment, but if you don't survive this war to take it off, that don't mean other big talk don't mean nothing. So he said, and the king of Israel answered and said, tell him, let not him that girdeth on his harness boast himself as he that putteth it off. Because if you get killed in a war, you can't take out the harness, right? So when you survive this war, then you can boast. That's what you let me know. Give me a Proverbs 27:1.
Okay. This is the book of Proverbs.
27 verse 1.
Yeah, I was trying to wait for a few brothers. I
Oh.
see him still flipping. Say Kahaan when you got it. All right, this is the book of Proverbs, chapter 27 and verse 1. Boast not thyself of tomorrow.
Right. Boast not thyself of tomorrow, because that's what Ben-Hadad was doing. Boasting himself of of the outcome of the war before the war even started. And he was reminding me that don't boast yourself, man. Let not him that put on the harness boast himself like the one that taking it off. Because if you don't survive this war, you can't take up your harness. Read again, Proverbs 27:1.
Proverbs chapter 27 and verse 1. Boast not thyself of tomorrow.
Boast not thyself of tomorrow. So don't be bragging about what you're going to accomplish tomorrow. Because like the saying goes, tomorrow is promised to no one. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Read on.
For thou knowest not what a day may bring forth.
Well, you don't know what the day is going to bring forth. Read on.
Let another man praise thee, and not thine own mouth, a stranger, and not thine own lips.
Right. So you know, like the saying goes, self-praise is no recommendation. So let somebody acknowledge your accomplishments. You know what I'm saying? And honor you for that. But don't be puffing up yourself. Well, you did this, you did that, and so on and so forth. Read on. Is there more?
Kahaan.
I'll go back and give me Ecclesiastes 7 verse 8.
Sirach?
No.
Ecclesiastes. Okay.
Ecclesiastes.
This is the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 7 and verse 8. Better is the end of a thing than the beginning thereof.
Right. Better is the end of a thing than the beginning thereof. So, I mean, you know, Ben-Hadad was about to start this war. Understand? But you don't know the outcome of the war yet. So you can't be bragging about, you know, I mean, about the outcome of the war before it even started. Better is the end of the thing than the beginning thereof. So when the thing's ended, you can evaluate the situations and saw, hey, what you accomplished, what you lost, and how you should go forward. And we'll go back to 1 Kings 20. Read verse 11 again. I'll just flow into it.
1 Kings chapter 20 and verse 11. And the king of Israel answered and said, tell him, let not him that girdeth on his harness boast himself as he that putteth it off.
Right. Right, because the man who take off his harness, you know, he survived the war. But if you don't survive this war, all the big talk you were making before the war started means nothing. All right, read on.
With it. Slop. Verse 1 Kings chapter 20 and verse 12. And it came to pass, when Ben-Hadad heard this message, as he was drinking, he and the kings in the pavilions, that he said unto his servants, set yourselves in array. And they set themselves in array against the city.
So Ben-Hadad didn't like that sarcastic remark from king he had. Okay, so okay, that's what you're saying? Okay, all right, watch this. So they were eating and drinking and making merry before the war. Saying, okay, it's time to go to war now. Let's go. Read on.
Verse 13. And behold, there came a prophet unto Ahab, king of Israel, saying, thus saith Yahweh, hast thou seen all this great multitude? Behold, I will deliver it into thine hand this day, and thou shalt know that I am Yahweh.
See, the Mosai was going to order his way to remind Israel that he was in fact the Mosai, because this Ahab, the same guy was married to Jezebel. Understand? The heathen woman who had Israel fallen on Belial and all the false gods and all that, and of these false prophets advising the king. So the Mosai realized the situation that Israel was in, how they were, being led by a wicked king, was influenced by this wicked heathen woman. But the Mosai was so merciful to Israel that he was even willing to give him another chance to see that I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I am your power. So what did he say to Ahab? See this multitude? Don't worry about it. I got you. I'm going to deliver them in your hands. Just like the Mosai was always on just like with Gideon. When Gideon had his large army, the Mosai always wanted to be known that he was the one delivering Israel. He didn't want it to be said that, hey, this man, Mosai didn't want to give his glory to anybody else. Why? He's a jealous power. That's why when we go astray and worshiping idols, not giving the Most High's praise, Most High's props, the Most High got an issue with that. That's why Israel is in the predicament and situation we're in right now. Not realizing the Most High is a jealous power. He's not someone to be taken for granted. Understand? And nobody wants to be taken for granted. Everyone wants to be appreciated. Not that we are proud of anything, but we want to be appreciated. And first of all, it's one thing to not appreciate me, but to give my glory, give the props to somebody else for something that I accomplished. That's offensive. And the Mosai's are very offended by such situations where, the heathens or the gods of other nations get the reward that he's entitled to. Or that man should take the glory that the Mosai is entitled to. That's what happened to Moses, right? A prominent man as Moses, the role that Moses played from the very beginning in Israel coming out of Egypt. But because at the waters of Meribah, remember that? And the Mosai told Moses to speak to the rock. And when they do that, water will come gushing out of the rock to feed the Israelites. But Moses was so fed up with his hard-headed Israelites that instead of speaking to the rock, he smote the rock. And by smiting the rock, it appeared that, the water came out of the rock as a result of Moses' effort to smite the rock. Like he cracked the rock and the water started coming out. You know what I'm saying? But if he had spoken to the rock and the water gushed out, then they would have said that it was a Mosai's word. But he didn't do that. So what? The Mosai was very offended by that. Both he and Aaron got jacked up for that. Not giving the Mosai's props. So whatever we do, that's why we started with Colossians 3:17. Whatever we do in words or deed, you know what I'm saying? Make sure that in accordance to the Mosai's laws, statutes and commandments, and the teaching of Almighty God, we shall always acknowledge the Mosai in all our ways, all our deeds, all our thoughts. Ignore the Mosai, he's going to ignore you. He's going to ignore us. Understand? That's why we're in the predicament we're in right now. For ignoring the Mosai. So the Mosai saying, Hosea, give me that, Hosea 5:15. We're just going about our business, not giving a care for anything. Just do whatever we want to do.
This is the book of Hosea, chapter 5 and verse 15. Mm-hmm. I will go and return to my place.
That's what the Moses says. I will go and return to my place. What is the most? What's the implication of that statement right there? The Moses said, I will go and return to my place. What is the implication of that statement right there? I will go and return to my place. What does it mean? Huh? It means the Most High was someplace else other than his home, and we're supposed to be. What is that talking about? He was with us. He was always with us. I will go and return. Read the whole thing. Maybe they get it from the read.
Hosea chapter 5 and verse 15. I will go and return to my place till they acknowledge their offense and seek my face. In their affliction, they will seek me early.
Right. So the Moses said he will go and return to his place until we acknowledge our offense, because we are continually offending the Most High without even caring about it. The Most High said, "Why not forget them?" The Most High was always with us, but what? We keep offending him. So the Most High said, "Forget them. I'm just go back to my place till they acknowledge their offense in their affliction." Because once the Most High turns back on us, once the Most High goes back to his place, we're on our own. And we can't hold our own. There are too many forces against us. You saw what happened is right there, right? This guy, Ben Hadad, what do you have? 32 different kings in alliance. The Most High got to be our defense. But the Most High defending us, we're done. And we've been done. We've been done for a long time. And the only way we can be undone is to come back to the Most High. Go to God, huh?
John 15 and 5.
Here we are, John 15 and 5.
First, you say John, St. John?
St. John 5.
John 15 verse 5. Come on.
Okay. St. John, chapter 15 and verse 5. I am the vine, ye are the branches. He that abideth in me, and I in him, the same bringeth forth much fruit. For without me ye can do nothing.
Right, without the Most High we can do nothing. The Most High is the vine, right? We are the branches. We can't have branches without the vine. The vine got the root. It got a root, and the vine is what that's springing from the root, from which the branches come. Understand? Like a vineyard. You plant the grapes, then you got the vines in front of the vines, and you got the leaves and grapes springing up. So without the vine, which is on the root, the Most High, we can't do nothing. Yeah, come on. Go back to First Kings.
Okay. We're at 14. 1 Kings chapter 20 and verse 14. And Ahab said, by whom? And he said,
I read 13 again.
13?
Yeah.
Okay. 1 Kings chapter 20 and verse 13. And behold, there came a prophet unto Ahab, king of Israel, saying, Thus saith Yahweh, hast thou seen all this great multitude? Behold, I will deliver it into thine hand this day, and thou shalt know that I am Yahweh. And Ahab said, by whom? And he said, Thus saith Yahweh, even by the young men of the princes of the provinces. Then he said, who shall order the battle? And he answered, thou.
See, with Israel, because I'm telling you, man, because Ahab knows the history of Israel and what the Most High done for us. But Israel is so, our attention span is so short. It's like you have short-term memory of something. All those things the Most High did for Israel, anyone could just come and just knock us off for a pedestal, and just this Most High, and I was following their idols. Because when the Most High sent the prophet to Ahab, he didn't actually question it too much. He just wanted to get some details, because he knew about the Most High. But it's like our people, like, you know, if the Most High is not there immediately, they'll switch to another power. So that's why Ahab was saying, he didn't ask who's the Most High, really. He didn't question the existence of the Most High, because he knew of the Most High. He said, by whom? He wanted details. By the young men of the provinces. Who will order the battle? You will. I read on, verse 15.
Verse 15. Then he numbered the young men of the princes of the provinces, and they were 232. And after them he numbered all the people, even all the children of Israel, being 7,000.
That's it? 7,000? That's not enough. That's a small number compared to the size of Ben-Hadad's army. Read on.
Verse 16. And they went out at noon, but Ben-Hadad was drinking himself drunk in the pavilions. He said, he and the kings, and 32 kings that helped him. And the young,
it's like Ben Hadad was already celebrating. Like he said, oh, we just go
like
we just
he
go
had
to the
an early-
motion. Yeah.
early victory or something.
Yeah, exactly. He was so was overconfident. Because well, you don't go to war drinking and getting drunk before going to go to war. But this was celebrating. Read on.
Verse 17. And the young men of the princes of the provinces went out first. And Ben-Hadad sent out, and they told him, saying, there are men out of Samaria. And he said, whether they come out for peace, take them alive. Or whether they be come out for war, take them alive. So these young men of the princes of the provinces came out of the city, and the army which followed them. And they slew every one his man. And the Syrians fled, and Israel pursued them.
Right, so 7,000 Israelites, 7,000 plus Israelites slew the Syrians who were like whose number was so large it was like the dust of Samaria. So the Israelites slew the Syrians and they fled. Read on. The Syrians fled. Read on.
And Israel pursued them. And Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria, escaped on an horse with the horsemen. And the king of Israel went out and smote the horses and chariots and slew the Syrians with a great slaughter. And the prophet came to the king of Israel and said unto him, go, strengthen thyself and mark and see what thou doest. For at the return of the year, the king of Syria will come up against thee. And the servants of the king of Syria said unto him, their gods are gods of the hills. Therefore, they were stronger than we. But let us fight against them in the plain, and surely we shall be stronger than they.
Right. So the prophet told Ahab, look, all right, you can evaluate your victory, but be assured that they're gonna come back again. They're gonna come back and invade your territory again. And immediately after that, what the servants of Ben-Hadad said to him, their gods are the gods of the hills. Therefore, we're going to fight them again, but this time we're going to fight them in the plain because our God is the God of the plains. You cannot see the Most High up in his thrones. What? Oh, yeah. When you say what?
Verse 22.
Read it again now.
Verse 22?
That's what I said in verse 22?
Yeah, he's talking about verse 22.
Read it again, let me get it.
1 Kings chapter 20 and verse 22. And the prophet came to the king of Israel and said unto him, go, strengthen thyself and mark, and see what thou doest. For at the return of the year, the king of Syria will come up against thee.
Right. Go, strengthen thyself and mark, and see what thou doest. And see what thou doest. For at the return of the year, the king of Syria will come up against thee. Strengthen thyself. Let's see what is that. That could mean a variety of things. It could mean also get some rest. And after getting some rest, you can reflect on things and evaluate how the war went, and see what you did right, what you did wrong, and prepare yourself for the retaliation. Because it said, strengthen yourself, mark and see what thou doest. See what thou doest. What's going to be your plan going forward? For at the return of the year, the king of Syria will come up against thee. Understand? So he said, you gotta basically reflect on the war, evaluate the situation, see what improvement need to be made, because it's not done yet. The war, they're coming back again. Okay, so that's what I was talking about. I wouldn't, generally speaking, it means all of that. strengthen yourself. You know what I mean? It could mean get some rest, then evaluate the situation. It could also mean strengthen yourself in that, assess your strength and your weaknesses, see what improvements you need to make, because there's going to be a part 2 to this battle that I was talking about. Read on.
Verse 24. And do this thing. Take the kings away, every man out of his place, and put captains in their rooms.
That's what the Assyrian, the servants of the Syrian king were telling him. And do this thing. Take, you 23 again. I went to it.
God. 1 Kings 20 and 23. And the kings and the servants of the king of Syria said unto him, their gods are gods of the hills, therefore they were stronger than we. But let us fight against them in the plain, and surely we shall be stronger than they.
Right.
And do this thing.
Right. In addition to that, we should do this. This is the change you have to make. Read on.
Take the kings away, every man out of his place, in their rooms.
Right. So these kings that puffed up, they're just kings. They're not mighty men. They're not warriors. You need warriors to fight for. You don't need all these figureheads. I mean, just walking around, just riding around on the horses, but they can't fight. Take away these kings and put captains in their stead. Men who are battle-tested captains. Or the spear. Or the sword. These kings they're soft. That's basically what was implied by that. Read on.
And number thee an army, like the army that thou hast lost.
Right. Give me the same army, the same size of the army. That's all the improvement you have to make. Fight them in the plain. Have captains over the army instead of these kings. And let's retaliate. Read on.
Horse for horse and chariot for chariot, and we will fight against them in the plain. And surely we shall be stronger than they. And he hearkened unto their voice, and did so. And it came to pass at the return of the year that Ben-Hadad numbered the Syrians, and went up to Aphek to fight against Israel. And the children of Israel were numbered, and were all present, and went against them. And the children of Israel pitched before them like two little flocks of kids. But the Syrians filled the country.
Wow, look at the comparison. Two flocks of kids.
Like goats.
Yeah, I'm saying. But the Syrians filled the country. So Mosiah about to defend Israel against the Syrians and the multitude of these nations. See, the size of the army of the heathens' army relative to the size of Israel's army. It's like the two flocks of kids versus a whole country of goats.
Verse 28. And there came a man of the Most High, and spake unto the king of Israel, and said, Thus saith Yahweh, because the Syrians have said, Yahweh is power over the hills, but he is not power over the valleys. Therefore will I deliver all this great multitude into thine hand, and ye shall know that I am Yahweh.
The Most High didn't like that statement coming from the servants of Ben-Hadad and Ben-Hadad himself. That the Most High is only the God of the hills and not the God of the valley. The Most High wanted to be known to these heathens that, hey, I am the God of the hills and the valleys, the mountains and the seas, the rivers and the oceans. So the Most High let Ahab know, because the Syrians said that, I'm going to deliver them into your hand once again. Read on.
Verse 29. And they pitched one over against the other 7 days. And so it was that in the seventh day the battle was joined. And the children of Israel slew of the Assyrians 100 100,000 footmen in one day.
So the Israelites slew 100,000 footmen in one day. Those two flocks, so to speak.
Wow.
Read on.
But the rest fled to Aphek, into the city, and there a wall fell upon 27,000 of the men that were left. And Benhadad fled and came into the city, into an inner chamber. And his servants said unto him, Behold now, we have heard that the kings of Israel, the house of Israel, are merciful kings. Let us, I pray thee, put sackcloth on our loins and ropes upon our heads, and go to the kings of Israel. Peradventure he will save thy life.
So now the heathen, the Syrians, and the servants are planning to surrender, to beg Israel for mercy. They have heard that Israel is a very merciful nation, that the kings are very merciful. So if they would acknowledge their defeat, so repent, put sackcloth on their loins, ashes on their head, and beg the king of Israel for mercy, then they were confident that they would have been granted that mercy. Read on.
So they girded sackcloth on their loins and put ropes on their heads, and came to the king of Israel and said, Thy servant Benhadad saith, I pray thee, let me alive. And he said, Is he yet alive? He is my brother. Now the men did diligently observe whether anything would come from him, and did hastily catch it. And they said, Thy brother Benhadad. Then he said, Go ye, bring him. Then Benhadad came forth to him, and he caused him to come up into the chariot.
Right. So the men, that's the plan they had to save their lives. Put on this act of being repentant, of acknowledging their defeat. And so they went to the king with that same plan, and they were observing how the king would react to that. That's why it says that now the men did diligently observe whether anything would come from him, and did hastily catch it. So hastily catch it means what? Observe it, be aware, be cognizant of it. Okay, all right. So it looks like he's in a very merciful mood. We're not going to put to death. That's why they're observing. So they probably just sent one person and see what the king would and they would stand in the back and observe how the king would respond to that initial request. So they could know what how to do going forward. Read on.
Verse 34. And Benhadad said unto him, The cities which my father took from...
So they called down, so Ahab called Benhadad, oh, it's a brother. We're brothers here. He fell for it. That's Israel. That's Israel, man. Always willing to forgive and forget the other nations. But always reluctant to do that to our own people. So he was eager to acknowledge Ben-Hadad as it's my brother. We called him and put him up into his chariots. Ben-Hadad is about to what? I read by verse 34 now, verse 34.
Verse 34. Mm-hmm. And Ben-Hadad said unto him, The cities which my father took from thy father I will restore, and thou shalt make...
So there were many wars going on between Syria and Israel, because Ben-Hadad's father had taken land, cities, from Ahab's father in previous generation. You know?
And thou shalt make streets for thee in Damascus, as my father made in Samaria. Then said Ahab, I will send thee away with this covenant.
So Ahab was so willing to ratify that agreement. He said, okay. Ben-Hadad said, okay, you know what? The cities that my father took from your father, I'm going to restore them. And you can be a city in my country, Just like my father built a city in your country. So that's all that you know. This guy was threatening to kick the door. Take your wives and your children, your gold and your silver, and the silver of your servants, and you let this guy live. Remind me of Saul when Saul let that Edomite king live. When the Most High ordained him to put all of them to death. Yeah. Of what Amalek did to Israel when they were coming out of Egypt. Read on.
So they covenanted with him and sent him away. Verse 35.
I mean, don't you realize that when you send him away, later on he's going to do what? He's going to regroup. He's going to get another army and come out and attack you again. Read on.
Verse 35. A certain man of the sons of the prophets said unto his neighbor in the word of Yahweh, smite me, I pray thee. And the man refused to smite him. Then said he unto him, because thou hast not obeyed the voice of Yahweh, behold, as soon as thou art depart from me, a lion shall slay thee. And as soon as he was departed from him, a lion found him and slew him. Then he found another man and said, smite thee, I pray thee. And the man smote him, so that in smiting he wounded him. So the prophet departed and waited for the king by the way, and disguised himself with ashes upon his face.
Right, so this prophet now, the sons of the prophets, he said unto his neighbor, smite me. I guess we're gonna see later on why he wanted man to smite him. Kind of strain that you request someone to smite him, meaning what, to hit you. And the man said, he didn't understand why. But I guess he should have known that this man is a prophet. So if he asked you to smite him, you have to know what he had. I guess some righteous motive for that. But he didn't see that. He didn't see that at the time, so he didn't smite him. The man said, because you refuse to obey the words of the Most High to smite me, as soon as you leave here, a lion is going to find you along the way and smite you, put you to death. So then he asked another fellow Israelite to smite him, and he did. Smite him so hard as the prophet. So let's see why he didn't want to be recognized as a prophet. He didn't want the king to recognize him. Read on.
1 Kings chapter 20 and verse 39. And as the king passed by, he cried unto the king, and he said, thy servant went out in the midst of the battle, and behold, a man turned aside, and brought a man unto me, and said, keep this man, if by any means.
So first of all, he wanted the king to believe that he was part of the battle. He was in the battle. That's why he had to be smitten. That's why he asked the Israelite to smite him, so he can look as if he was wounded in the battle. Read on. Read again. Read verse 39 again.
Verse 39. And as the king passed by, he cried unto the king, and he said, thy servant went out into the midst of the battle, and behold, a man turned aside, and brought a man unto me, and said, keep this man, if by any means he be missing, then shall thy life be for his life, or else thou shalt pay a talent of silver. And as thy servant was busy here and there, he was gone. And the king of Israel said unto him, so shall thy judgment be. Thyself has decided it.
Right. So this prophet, who disguised himself as a soldier, made up a story, an analogy to the king, and said, hey, while I was in battle, a man brought a prisoner of war to me and said, keep this man, keep him in custody. If you lose this man, I'm gonna require your life in exchange for his life. Mm-hmm. And the king said, hey, that's fair, that makes sense to me. That's what the king said. So I guess the prophet wanted some kind of acknowledgement. You know this prophet does always speak in parables.
Right.
They always just like I think it was Nathan who went to David, when David slept with Bathsheba's wife, and you know what I mean, I say, and a certain man slept with a certain man's wife, and so on. Nathan said, "You are that man." You know what I'm saying? They always make it look appears if they're talking about somebody else, and it's actually talking about you. Just get your response. That way, basically you condemn yourself, so you can't go back on your word.
Right.
So that's exactly what this prophet did to King Ahab. Read verse
42 or 41?
41 again.
Verse 41. And he hastened.
Yeah, read 40. Read 40.
Oh, 40. I'm slock. 40. And thy servant was busy here and there. He was gone. And the king of Israel said unto him, so shall thy judgment be. Thyself has decided it.
Right. So that's it. That's your problem. And as a servant was busy here and there, he was gone. And the king of Israel said unto him, so shall that judgment be. So shall that judgment be. I mean, that's a breaks. He was put in your custody, and you were negligent to let him get away. So now you have to pay the consequences. Read on.
And he hasted and took the ashes away from his face. And the king of Israel discerned him that he was of the prophets.
So now he revealed himself, cleaned up himself, took away the ashes and the king from his face, and the king recognized him as one of the prophets. Read.
Verse 42. And he said unto him, thus saith Yahweh, because thou hast let go out of thy hand a man whom I appointed to utter destruction. Therefore thy life shall go for his life, and thy people for his people. And the king of Israel went to his house heavy and displeased, and came to Samaria.
Right. So there was some fear of Ahab for the Most High. And so he recognized that I messed up. He recognized he messed up, even though he was married to Jezebel, the heathen woman who had him worshiping the Baal and the gods of the other nations and all that. He had some fear for the Most High, because when the prophet let him know what's going to befall him, because you failed to follow the commandment of the Most High. Hey, the Most High is going to require your life for sparing the life of that heathen. So that we're going to wrap it up right there, chapter 20. We're going to continue chapter 20. We're going to finish our 1 Kings to the Most High willing next Shabbat, Friday. Verse 21 and verse 22. So you can go ahead and read this in advance of next week, verse 21 and 22. And if you have any questions for the course of the class, feel free. Okay. So we're gonna conclude this today, so the brothers can get ready for camp in a couple of hours. And don't forget, tomorrow, the Most High willing, at 12 noon Eastern, we're gonna have the Hebrew class, and then after that we have the Shabbat service by Chief Minister Shalamah. And Madiam Wapanya, Yerushalayim, stand and face Jerusalem. Psalms 133. Shayar, Hama Ailwa, Ladawad, Hana, Ma, Tawab, Wama, Naayam, Shabah, Akyam, Kam, Yakad, Kashaman, Atawab, Ail, Haraash, Yarad, Ail, Azakwan, Zakwan, Aharan, Shayarad, Ail, Kaya, Madawat Yawa, Katal, Karamwan, Shayarad, Ail, Araria, Tazayawan, Kaya, Sham, Kazawa, Yahawa, Abarakah, Kayawam, Aid, Iwalam, Ba'asham, Hamashiach, Yahushai, the water, Aman.
This is the book of Psalms 133. Behold, how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. It is like the precious ointment upon the head that ran down upon the beard, even Aaron's beard, that went down to the skirts of his garments, as the dew of Hermon, and as the dew that descended upon the mountains of Zion. For there, by Hashem Mashiach Yahushai, the Most High commanded the blessings, even life forevermore. By Hashem Hamashiach Yahushai, the water, the myad, man.
The water Yasharala